Hey there, everybody. This is Miss Valentine, and you are watching the 1.1 Notes Presentation Part 1. We are going to go through the notes, and you will fill in the blanks on your 1.1 Notes handout. It's a Google Doc that's in Schoology. And you'll fill in the blanks with the yellow words that you see in the text here. So any lines that you see, you can double click on those blanks in Google Docs and fill in the words. Now, as we get to the pit stops, I will tell you to pause the video so you can answer the questions in the pit stops. The answers for all of your pit stop questions can be found in the notes just above those pit stops. So all of the pit stop questions are referring to things that are directly in front of them. So let's go ahead and get started. This entire class really is more about environmental science than just ecology. And environmental science includes not just the living organisms and how they interact, but it has to do with the air, the water, and the land that are surrounding those living organisms. So it also includes the study of human impact on the environment, more specifically. So next unit is going to be about ecology specifically, but environmental science is a much broader area, and that's what we're going to be focusing on this school year. Interdisciplinary is a word that just means many fields of study, and that's what environmental science is all about. Biology, earth science, physics, chemistry, and social sciences or social studies are all involved in environmental science. It's a very complex field that involves life sciences, physical sciences, and social sciences. So there are a lot of different issues we'll be talking about this year that are related to science and to things that you might study in social studies. So it's a really cool field because it's so interdisciplinary about many fields of study. Our environment has changed dramatically since humans came into play about 2 million years ago. Wherever humans have hunted, grown food, or settled, we have changed the environment. And like I said, there's humans 2 million years ago, and even they changed the environment. There were 11 other human species aside from our species, which is Homo sapiens. They are all extinct. We are the only human species left, but even our ancestors and those other human species, they all have contributed to changing the environment. You could say we're kind of an invasive species in a way. Now, here's a recent example. In New York, Manhattan Island used to be a forest. But in only 300 years, we have turned it into a concrete jungle, a city, a huge city. So it doesn't take us very much time to completely change an environment, and that we'll go through a few more examples about that. But we humans have a very strong impact on any environment that we move into. We started out as a species, and our other human species also did this. We started out a lot like the animals that are around us. So we went around and we looked for plants and we hunted other organisms. We hunted wild animals. And so this was, for much of our history, we basically lived like other animals. It did affect the environment though. So when Native American tribes were hunting for buffalo, they had to, or they chose to burn the prairies, which would prevent trees from growing and make it easier to hunt the buffalo. So even a culture that we assume has more respect for the earth, and they do have more respect for the earth, even they affected the environment because they wanted to more easily hunt their food. So even earth-centric cultures affect the environment. All right, you can pause the video. We've got a couple of pit stops here. So answer those questions by rereading the notes that we just did and writing your responses in the pit stop box on Schoology or on your Google Doc. And please make sure that you write with complete sentences. The agricultural revolution is a very recent event when you look at the span of human history. It was only 10,000 years ago that we stopped moving around hunting animals and collecting plants. We stopped moving around and we started keeping those things right next door to us. So agriculture is just raising crops and livestock for food and other products that are useful to us. So like I said, instead of having to move around and look out for those things, We just planted the plants right next to us, and we raised the animal right next to us. And so that was such a revolution. It changed the way that we moved, or I guess didn't move. We didn't have to go out hunting anymore. We didn't have to go out gathering plants. We just stayed put and put them next to us. So it made a big difference for humans. It allowed our population to grow at a very rapid rate. And we started to settle down into one area. Instead of leaving and going to hunt for new animals or look for new plants, we could stay right where we were. So our population grew, we came closer together into smaller areas, and that impacted the local environment a lot more because you didn't have people moving on and letting the environment recover. They just stayed put and changed that environment completely. So it wasn't all good for the environment. Habitats were destroyed to replace it with farmland. Westerville is an example of this. Westerville used to be a more wooded area, and a lot of those trees were cut down to make farmland. We replaced forest with farmland, and then when we see that, when we cut down trees, a lot of the soil can get blown away by the wind or just exposed to sun and dried out. You could have floods and water shortages. There's an imbalance of the water cycle. So a lot of these negative environmental impacts can happen when you remove trees. So go ahead and pause the video for the next pit stop and then hit play when you are ready to go. After the agricultural revolution, we have our more recent revolution, the Industrial Revolution. And this started at around 1850 or so. And that's a big period of development because we shifted from having animal energy sources, so including ourselves, our own labor, and animal labor, to using fossil fuels like coal and oil to help power things. And this meant a whole lot more energy was being put into the processes that we used to make goods and to make food. So it influenced agriculture, it allowed industry to grow, that's why it's called the Industrial Revolution, and transportation changed. So you could get products from one place to another much faster, much more easily. You also could move people much faster and much more easily. So if you needed labor, a labor source, they could take the train instead. So the Industrial Revolution, this introduction of fossil fuels, totally was a game changer for our entire species. We saw the creation of factories, which allowed us to make things much less expensive than doing it yourself. So it used to be people would have like 2 outfits that they'd wear, and that was it. That's all they owned, and they would wash it maybe once a month or so or whatever. But like once factories became a thing, you could buy clothes a lot cheaper. People mass produced these things. Now, there wasn't always fair treatment of the people who were making the clothes, and there still isn't. But you saw an increase in the amount of products that you could buy. And then farming changed as well because you went from having human labor and animal labor to having machines that could do a lot of that work for us. And that helped us make a lot more food. It also made it so that people didn't need to farm their own land anymore. They could buy their own food and then move to the cities and work in factories or do other jobs. So it totally changed the way that economies looked because people didn't have to produce their own food anymore. They could just buy it. So the Industrial Revolution also introduced environmental problems as well, because when you're using fossil fuels in particular, it can be very messy. It's messy to get it out of the ground. It pollutes the air. We know that now. They weren't really aware of it then. But then all the other things that come along with population growth also impacted the environment. Now, in the 1900s, we started using chemistry to make artificial substances. So we stopped using natural things and we started making these artificial things. Plastics are an example of something that's made from oil. Artificial pesticides and fertilizers have also been used to help us grow more food. So chemistry has really exploded in the last century, and it has allowed us to do a lot more things and make a lot more things. Not always a good thing. It seems to be good for us from a convenience standpoint, but for the earth, it's not always necessarily a great thing. So again, the Industrial Revolution has made our life easier. I mean, what would we do without our microwaves or without electricity? But we do see more now the environmental problems that those things have presented. And that is really what environmental science focuses on, is dealing with those problems that were created by the Industrial Revolution. So that's really a big focus that we're going to look at throughout this entire school year. And here is our next pit stop. So I will give you, or pause the video and then go ahead and hit play when you are ready to continue. So Spaceship Earth is this concept that you should have seen in the outline last week. And it's really just saying that our Earth is like the only spaceship we'll ever need. We are floating around in this otherwise hostile universe, and we have everything that we need already on the Earth. We are essentially a closed system. So that means that you only have sunlight entering and heat leaving. You have like asteroids and meteors and things that come into the Earth's atmosphere. You also have us putting satellites out into space and space probes and things like that. But that's not a whole lot. Essentially, all the stuff that is on the Earth is going to stay on the Earth, and it will just keep recycling over millions and millions of years. That's what it has been doing for millions of years. So we have everything we need. We don't need to design a spaceship to go out into outer space and help us live. In fact, we saw in the Biosphere 2 video that that is not very easy to do. So Spaceship Earth is the only spaceship we really ever need to survive, to maintain our species and our environment. Now, population growth is one of the big themes in environmental science, because our Industrial Revolution, modern medicine, and sanitation all created this huge population boom, which is good, success of a species. We like that, that we've been successful, but it also has presented those environmental problems. I just want to speak real quick to modern medicine. We did not have the antibiotics until about, I'm trying to remember what year it came out. It was in the 1900s, earlier 1900s, that we finally figured out how to kill a lot of bacterial infections. And that was a huge revolution that saved many, many, many lives, still saves a lot of lives. Other aspects of vaccines, vaccinations, those have increased survivability of the human population. And then sanitation also allowed the human population to grow faster. We didn't even know what germs were back as far as the 1800s. If we had a pandemic back then, people were much more likely to die because they didn't know about hand washing. They didn't even know about little microscopic organisms. So all of that together, the Industrial Revolution, modern medicine, and sanitation, allowed this huge spike in population growth. Up until that point, we were well under 1 billion people, but it just skyrocketed after we came upon the Industrial Revolution and the other things that went along with it, like modern medicine and sanitation. So in the past 50 years, nations have used a lot of resources to keep up with our need for food. As our population grows, we need to make more food. Now, as we make more food, more people can live. So it continues to grow as long as we continue to expand our food resources. The consequence, though, is that we have a lot of environmental problems because of that, including habitat destruction and pollution. Now, it is likely that our population, our population will double during this century. We started with 6 billion people in 1999, and it's likely that we will hit 12 billion people by the time 2100 rolls around. So that's a huge, huge population boom. So we can expect pressure on the environment to increase, and that's one of the big challenges of environmental science, is how do we deal with human population growth and the effects that it has on the environment in a way that we can continue to live in a sustainable way. And here we are at our last 2 pit stops for this video presentation, talking about human population growth. Go ahead and answer those questions, and then tune in for the 1.1 notes presentation part 2 in another video.